Hello everyone, bonsoir tout le monde. My name is David Neufeld, and I am proud to serve as your USJE National President. I want to begin by recognizing that while USJE is convening this town hall virtually, we are meeting on Indigenous land that has been inhabited by Indigenous peoples for thousands of years. I am joining you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, the territory where USJE's national office is located. Please note that simultaneous interpretation is available, and in order to access that service, please click on the interpretation button. I want to welcome you to tonight's information session. The reality is that we are holding this town hall because affected notices were served to over 400 of our members employed by CSC. While USJE has been actively monitoring CSC's workforce adjustment plans for several months, information about Wave 2 has been just shared in the last couple of weeks. As such, our goal this evening is to provide you with as much information as possible and provide guidance through the WFA process. I'm joined by my seasoned Director of Labor Relations, Melanie Crescenzi, as well as PSAC subject matter expert, Darren Pachon, on the Workforce Adjustment Appendix. We will begin with an overview of the notices received, followed by a presentation on the WFA appendix. After that, we will be split into breakout rooms to have a more group-specific conversation that will be led by our USJE Regional Vice President. The groups will be split as follows. 1, Human Resources. 2, Corporate Services. 3, Health Services. 4th, Programs. Now don't worry, we have technical support, and our communications team will explain how to join those breakout rooms and will be available to provide support if needed. Before we get started with our invited representatives, I would like to share that although USJE understands that CSC has a mandate under the Comprehensive Expenditure Review to find operational savings, we strongly oppose both the proposed cuts and the process by which these decisions were made. The positions affected are vital to the effective operations of the federal correctional system, and at no point was USJE given any opportunities to provide feedback or insight, despite months of discussions regarding budget reductions and organizational changes. At this stage, USJE is extremely concerned about the unintended impacts of this latest round of reductions. USJE believes that they will have a negative effect on the workplace well-being of USJE members, overall employee morale, and add to already untenably high workloads. Inevitably, the cumulative impact will be significant. It is undeniable that these cuts will have an impact on USJE's public safety personnel. As soon as USJE received notice that affected letters were going out, I met with the leadership of CSE to obtain additional information. At this stage, USJE is pressing for greater transparency around the cuts. Specifically, USJE has been requesting that the Correctional Service of Canada provide the true cost of these reductions and identify what measures we put in place to ensure that our members will not be expected to do more with less. USJE has also questioned the number of vacant positions being used to account for a portion of the operational savings and the number of positions being outright eliminated through the WFA process. USJE has also been challenging CSE on how they intend to introduce or utilize artificial intelligence in the workplace in the future, as this is something that was woven throughout the federal government budget in November 2025 as a means to gain efficiencies. The Commissioner has mentioned that the integration of AI will not be done without consultation with the relevant stakeholders, including unions, but we still don't know yet what that will look like. Our main goals for today's information session are to provide you as much knowledge and support as possible for you to make an informed decision and to collect information from you to help us defend your work. I would like to note that USJE's Director of Labor Relations, Melanie Crescenzi, sits on all WFA committees where USJE members are being impacted. I want to thank her for taking on this very important work. Je tiens à souligner que la directrice chevronnée des relations de travail du SESJ Mélanie Crescenzi a participé à tous les comités concernant le réaménagement des effectifs qui touchent les membres de SESJ. Je souhaite la remercier d'avoir entrepris ce travail très important. I will now turn it over to Melanie to go more in depth about the information that has been provided to USJE about these recent cuts at CSC.
Oh, Mélanie, we can't hear you right now.
Maintenant?
Oui, ça fonctionne. Merci.
Désolé. Apologies. Good evening, everybody. As David noted, I sit on all WFA committees where USJE has affected members. For tonight's purposes, I'll start by providing a brief overview of the big numbers that were shared for Wave 2, and that will be done in French. Thereafter, we'll drill down a little bit on the information to look at the different sectors that have been particularly targeted in Wave 2, and that part, so that you know, will be done in English. Donc, dans le cadre de la deuxième vague d'initiatives du SCC, la première réunion au cours de laquelle nous avons pris connaissance des secteurs qui seraient concernés par ce deuxième et dernier exercice de l'examen exhaustif des dépenses s'est tenue le 19 juin. Par la suite, le département a communiqué plus de détails au cours de la semaine du 22 juin. Comme beaucoup d'entre vous le savent, c'est aussi au cours de la semaine du 22 juin que les avis de statut touché ont été envoyés aux employés, ce qui nous a laissé très peu, voire même aucun, temps pour analyser les informations qui nous étaient communiquées. Nous n'en sommes encore qu'au début de la deuxième vague, mais ce que nous savons à ce jour, c'est que 405 membres du SESJ ont été touchés par cette deuxième vague. Sur ces 405 membres, une réduction de 144 postes est prévue. Parmi ces 405 membres, 392 sont éligibles au programme de départ volontaire, donc le PDV, et se trouvent actuellement dans la période de 30 jours prévue par ce programme. À quelques exceptions près, s'il y en a, la période du PDV devrait prendre fin le 24 juillet 2026 pour tous les membres éligibles. Parmi ces 405 membres, donc, il reste 13 qui ne sont pas éligibles au programme de départ volontaire et, selon nos informations, ces gens-là ont déjà été informés qu'ils se trouvent actuellement dans leur période d'option car leurs postes seront éliminés. So those are the big numbers. For CSC's Wave 2 initiative, the first meeting where we learned of what sectors would be affected. And so while we can't go into detail for every position that has been affected, there are notable changes to 4 of CSC's sectors that the department has advised us of. So as David noted, those are human resources, corporate services, health services, and correctional programs. I'll try to give a little bit of each of what we know so far. So for human resources, CSC has advised that they're continuing to push to streamline processes and services to meet organizational priorities and eliminate any duplication. Thus far, in total, 148 members across the HR sector represented by USJE have been affected, with an overall reduction target of 46 positions. What this could look like across this country, we're told that there may be a reduction in administrative support that was previously dedicated to supporting directors and assistant directors. Recent changes to recruitment and staffing needs will also likely lead to reducing the number of resources previously allocated to staffing, administration, and support services. For training and development, CSC has made no secret that they're looking to change how it delivers training and its learning services, which will result in a change in work for staff training coordinators and officers. For corporate services, the main focus appears to be the fact that CSC is moving to a centralized financial operations model, and as a result, there will be a reduction of CR5 positions across the regions. As of now, what we are aware of is 62 USJE members in this sector received notices of affected status, and the department expects to reduce this group by 10 positions. Health services is a third sector that has been targeted in this wave. As we've shared in the past at the last town hall in May of 2026, health services was changing the way it operates even before the comprehensive expenditure review. They were looking to address present day needs, which includes additional and better support for an aging demographic in the institutions, individuals with substance use needs, and Indigenous patients. We're told that 10% of the nursing workforce will be reclassified as licensed practical nurses, so LPNs, who can provide a wide range of services. LPNs are our members, so this will lead to new membership within USJE. However, with changes also comes reductions. 22 USJE members in health services have received notices of affected status with an overall reduction target of 13 positions. Finally, we have the correctional programs modernization. The term modernization is CSC's terminology, not USJE's. What they mean by that is they're seeking to make program management more efficient and less administratively burdensome. So there's been talk about a need to ensure that programs delivered at the right time, in the right sequence, and with an objective of supporting the offender's progress in their correctional plans. There's also been talk about examining the certification process for correctional program officers to make the process more efficient. In terms of numbers, 153 of the 405 affected positions are within the program sector, with a reduction target of 68. And we actually have a little bit more information to break that one number down. So we can break down those numbers a little bit more. So of the 153 affected, 94 program officers with a reduction target of 44 positions. 24 of those are program managers or regional program managers with a reduction target of 10 positions, and 35 program assistants with a reduction target of 14 positions. So where I don't have data and what we're not being told is what the employer strategy is to address the holes left by a reduced workforce. USJE has been adamant that any legitimate cuts to human resourcing have to be accompanied by a plan on how the services will be reduced or significantly changed to account for the fact that you have fewer people doing the work. Not surprisingly, the employer has failed to provide us with any such plan, and some sector heads have even admitted that no such plan exists. So while we can analyze the data, such as what I just provided to you all day long, it does not tell us what the real life implications are to those who are left in the workplace. That's what we're hoping to hear from you today in the focus groups that are to come, and I look forward to see what the feedback is. À toi la parole, Seb.
Merci beaucoup, Mélanie. Alors, je pense qu'à ce moment-ci, David will like to come back and just give a brief update, and then after that, we'll move on to Darren for the WFA presentation. And for our attendees on the info session right now, if you do have questions, feel free to send them right now in the Q&A, and we'll see if Darren covers them. And if the content hasn't been covered, well, at the end of the session, we'll get through your questions. So feel free to send them over in the Q&A section. David, the floor is back to you.
Thank you, Sebastien, and thank you, Melanie, for all the information you provided and your support at this crucial time. USJE has been very busy over the past few months as we are working to get as much information as possible from the departments and agencies. We have also sought to equip USJE representatives at every level, including regional vice presidents, with the information and tools to fight these cuts and best represent our members. There's also been some strong media interest over the last little while on the cuts being made within the public safety realm. Consequently, we have leveraged several opportunities to highlight the invaluable role of USJE's members in keeping Canadians safe. This includes briefings to the Minister's Office where possible, briefings to the Commissioner of the Correctional Service of Canada, and comments to the media. Now, when we first heard about the Comprehensive Expenditure Review and workforce adjustments, we developed 4 major goals. First of all, create a campaign that fights to protect members' jobs, workplace conditions, and public safety. Second of all, ensure that the campaign includes sustained political action and puts pressure on the government to, where possible, reconsider, reverse decisions taken that have an impact on public safety and our membership. Thirdly, implement a campaign that promotes member mobilization across the country and encourages members to stand up against the cuts. And fourthly, provide support and education to our frontline members who are impacted by the cuts and workforce adjustment. I am proud to report that we are delivering on those 4 campaign goals, and I invite you to visit our campaign website. You can find it at safetyandjeopardy.ca for more information. Pour accéder à notre site web de campagne, je vous invite à visiter sécuritéendanger.ca pour plus d'informations. I will now turn it over to Darren from PSAC to go more in depth about the Workforce Adjustment Appendix and WFA. Darren?
Perfect. Thank you, David. I'll wait until the slides are queued up and then I'll begin.
Perfect. Thank you, Darren. And just for our listeners, so they are aware, the slides that Darren will be using for his presentation will be made available on USJE's website, including the recording of this info session. Please note that any personal information, if you do ask questions in the end, we won't put that on the website. So I see that our fabulous technicians have both the WFA PowerPoints in English and in French. So you're free to go, Darren.
Excellent. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak tonight. I'm going to walk through about 14 or so slides of content with the aim of pointing to key concepts as well as resources. And Seb's also going to share those links to the websites in the chat as well, or they will be shared in a forthcoming note. So without further ado, I will say that what we've talked about tonight, these cuts of USJE members, these WFA notifications are a part of we're pushing about 15,000 PSAC-wide WFA notifications to date. So I just wanted to share that weighty piece of information as well. And I'll ask the technician to move to the next slide. Okay, so while I am going to speak about the job security provisions in the WFA appendix, we first start with the Article 23 job security and the collective agreement. And what we want you to know here, importantly, is that alongside the WFA appendix, the job security article is also important for the committee members doing that advocacy with the departments to ensure that reductions in the workforce will be accomplished through attrition. Next slide, please. So what are the objectives of the WFA appendix? The core objectives is to maximize employment for indeterminate employees, like we have bold there. That seems a simple concept. However, what is key is that the Workforce Adjustment Appendix only applies to indeterminate employees. There are resources for term employees on the landing page, and we invite folks who want to share information with terms that are also being ended earlier cut to avail themselves of those. But the core of the WFA appendix is to maximize employment opportunities for indeterminate employees. Next slide, please. So what is workforce adjustment? Talked about the objectives. Let's move to what the deputy heads are actually saying. The first two there, lack of work and discontinuance of a function, are the rationale, the reasons that folks most frequently see in their WFA notification letters. They're the most common types of workforce adjustment reasons, and they are typically invoked by the government when they implement budget cuts. Next slide, please. So one thing to note in this slide here is you'll see references to section numbers. These are section numbers in the Workforce Adjustment Appendix. If you are a member who falls under the SV Appendix or the SV Collective Agreement or the PA Collective Agreement, while the appendix letters are different, the numbering of the appendices are similar. So first you have the notification to the union. Notification to the union must include key pieces of information you'll see there at the bottom. It must be given 2 days before the members are notified. The union often is involved in preparing and engaging or preparing itself and assembling resources to support folks who receive affected notices. That key information includes the member's identity, location of their work unit, the expected date of the announcement, anticipated timing of the workforce adjustment situation, as well as the number, group, and level employees likely involved in this decision. So the department must give the union some prescribed information in the collective agreement to ensure the process unfolds as it's relative to the entitlements prescribed in the collective agreement. Next slide, please. So notifications to employees. So what does the notification that you receive look like? What does it include? First thing I'll say is one of the resources we have is like you've received an affected letter checklist. It's an affected checklist that it maps out a whole, and I get a lot of questions about sort of what to do if I receive an affected letter. So we created a checklist that helps people think through that process. What will the piece of paper, what will that PDF actually say? In some instances, in some instances, it will advise them of the next steps, but all of them will say your services are no longer required for reason of workforce adjustment, perhaps lack of work, discontinuance of function. Both that status is you are then affected, and in that letter, it may advise you that there's a voluntary departure program. It may also advise you that you are in receipt of a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, which we'll get to in the next slide, as well as, or it may include information that says you are now opting, which means there's no voluntary departure program. You won't go through a selection or retention, a SURLO process, but you are indeed made opting, at which point you have 120 days to make a decision. So these are some of the components that the letters have. Not all letters are created the same. I haven't seen a template, although we've tried to influence it and create a template that includes all the information. So if your letter is confusing, please reach out to a USJE representative, and they will help you work through that letter if there are parts of it of which you're confused or you don't know what something means. There are folks there to support you. Next slide, please. Okay, some core concepts here. So I've talked a little bit about what it means to receive an affected notice. The employer is going to declare this, discuss the member's name is going to be on this affected list. It's in this letter. It may include a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, or it may just be a letter that says you are affected, and that process just kind of like you just sit with this status until the next thing that the department announces. Two other key concepts, one of which I mentioned there, are the reasonable job offer and the guarantee of a reasonable job offer. These are two things that could be a part of that letter. They are defined. They have full definitions in the collective agreement. The reasonable job offer is an offer of indeterminate employment in the core public service, normally at an equivalent level, but it could be at a lower level. Of course, there's salary protection in that instance. You must be both trainable in this situation and mobile. And where practicable, it has to be this offer must be in the employee's headquarters area as defined by the travel directive. There's a few more details. The collective about what the reasonable job offer includes, but those are some of the most important ones. There'll be a seamless transfer of benefits, but these are all outlined in the collective agreement. The guarantee of a reasonable job offer is a guarantee that if there is no reasonable job offer, a guarantee is one of the options that may occur, in which that the member is being given a guarantee that the department will find them a reasonable job offer because there's likely to be employment available in the department. Guarantees an employee with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer retains the current salary and is paid until the employer offers them that reasonable job offer. And there's no time limit on this entitlement, and they must be given meaningful work until they receive that reasonable job offer. So these are some core concepts, and I'll ask folks to move to the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so some core concepts and then moving into some core processes, also introducing, of course, some new terms here. So the voluntary departure program. So if you don't receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer or a reasonable job offer, and your letter is like, okay, you got 30 days to decide whether you want to depart the public service via this voluntary departure program that has been established. What is the voluntary departure program? It is a part of a collective agreement that the union negotiated to mitigate against involuntary layoff. What does that mean? It means that it provides options for people who want to voluntarily choose to leave the public service. The options are outlined, and I'll get a little bit more into the options later, but high level. The options in the collective agreement include a transition support measure and resignation. That's option B. A transition support measure is based on your years of service, and there's an annex in the WFA appendix that says you get X amount of weeks of pay for X amount of years of service. And then you resign in that instance if you choose option B. Option C has two parts. Those parts include part one is you could choose either an education allowance, which is $17,000, and then the parts of option B, the transition support measure and resignation. Option C includes an education allowance, the $17,000 reimbursable education allowance, the transition support measure, and rather than resign, you have up to 2 years of leave without pay. During that leave without pay period, maybe I'll pause. I'll wait until I get to the options once to get into that detail there. But the employer must establish these the voluntary departure programs if there are 5 or more persons in the same group and level and in the same work unit. Sometimes we see departments establish it for everybody. Nonetheless, they don't worry about the 5 threshold. I know that Melanie mentioned the date to which the voluntary departure program concludes. So that's an important date to keep an eye out for. Staying on top of our deadlines, super important. Voluntary departure programs must not be used to exceed reduction targets. This is really important. Again, Melanie mentioned some reduction targets of certain class groups and levels. There are folks who sit on committees, the joint WFA committees is USJE, where everybody's very focused on this because we don't want the employer to use voluntary programs to cut more than they must. That's again another important piece. If the number of volunteers is larger than the required number of positions to be eliminated, volunteers will be selected based on seniority. This is one of the few instances where seniority is part of the collective agreement. Vacation entitlement is another one. Pension waivers are also available to employees who qualify and participate in a voluntary departure program. If you choose option B, you see the final point there. Next slide, please. So I know I'm moving fast, but the slides are going to be made available as well as the video. So the next piece is the selection of employees for retention and layoff, SERLO. The SERLO process is one that it is not found in the collective agreement. It exists outside the collective agreement. So if there's not enough volunteers departing the public service via the voluntary departure programs, the employer begins this process of who is retained and who is then made opting or subject to possible layoff. Again, during the 2012-2013 major round of cuts. It's a very awful process. There's lots of managerial discretion. Managers have the discretion to set essential qualifications, including language, set asset qualifications. You may have heard people competing for their own job. It lacks transparency. Again, there's little recourse outside of staffing complaints. It's not part of the collective agreement, and of course PSAC has made efforts to challenge this process in the past, but what is important to that last point is current and future operational requirements or needs of an organization. Employment equity is one of the factors that that is considered needs of an organization, operational requirements, needs of an organization. So the union advocates for those considerations there, for employment equity related considerations when SERLO processes are occurring. When you are informed about the SERLO process, if you are informed, so if you find yourself in a SERLO process, the criteria for assessment must be outlined to you, as well as if you need accommodations, those must be made available, as well as the results of the SERLO process must be communicated to you. And if you're not retained, you're going to be notified that you are opting in that instance, which takes us to the next slide. So the SERLO process is an awful process, creates a lot of stress. And so what comes next after this? So if an employee does not receive a reasonable job offer, does not receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, they do not depart via a voluntary departure program, and they're also not retained through a SERLO process, they become opting. Your affected letter may also say that you're opting. That's another pathway to this moment. So the opting, you have some tough choices when you are an opting employee. You have a 120-day window to make a decision. If you don't decide within the 120 days, option A is chosen for you by default. So let's get into a little bit more detail of what the options are. So option A, and again, like you're kind of making that decision of like, you're going to leave, or you're going to look for a new career. Maybe you're going to retire. Maybe you want to, but a lot of folks, they say like, yeah, I want to stay. I need to find another job in the public service. So option A is the option you choose if you're going to continue to look for a job. Option A means that you remain employed in your position for a year. You have what's called a surplus priority status, during which time you are searching for a reasonable job offer and are in what's called this surplus priority period. You have 12 months surplus priority status, or it's a 12-month period to find employment. If you do not find employment after that 12-month period, you are laid off, and the process around a layoff begins, or it occurs at that point. Option B is the transition support measure, which is a lump sum based on your years of service. Plus, you may qualify for a pension waiver to retire early. As I mentioned, there's this upcoming slide, 2 slides from now, there's a pension waiver slide. The key pieces about, so for instance, on the transition support measure, say you have 16 to 29 years of service, that's 52 weeks of salary, just so you can kind of get a sense of what that means. With respect to option C, C1 is TSM, educational allowance of up to $17,000 with receipts, and resignation. If you take option 1, you have to maintain that connection with HR to file your education receipts. And with option 2, for that 2 years of leave without pay that you can avail yourself of, in addition to the other pieces, you can retain your pension and benefit contributions by paying the employer and the employee part. Finally, to navigate this process, there's a $1,200 counseling services to support folks searching for reemployment or considering retirement. Next slide, please. So alternation, you may have heard about alternation. The PSAC has established an alternation platform. Treasury Board also has an alternation platform. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't think so, but they may. I'm not sure about Correctional Services Canada if they've established a departmental alternation platform. But essentially, what alternation is it's a job swap. A non-affected employee is swapping jobs with an affected employee and exiting instead of them. Eligibility, you must be at the same group and level to do this swap, or you must be considered equivalent, and that is within a 6% salary range. Affected employees must meet the qualifications for the positions of the person that they want to alternate with. This includes language requirements. And the benefit for the non-affected employee who seeks alternation is they may avail themselves of option B, the transition support measure and resignation, pension waiver if eligible, and option C1. Notice that you are not eligible through alternation for option C2, which includes the 2 years of leave without pay piece. What's key for alternation is getting all the records in writing. There's a really comprehensive FAQ on the Treasury on the PSAC WFA landing page that speaks to rights and entitlements, eligibility, rights and protections, and the PSAC alternation platform. But to maximize alternation possibilities, make sure you're making profiles on the PSAC alternation platform and the Treasury Board one, which is found on what they call their TAPS portal, the Treasury Board application portal. They have an alternation platform on that portal. And if you suspect some unfair dealing or unfair denial in this, reach out to your union. There's comprehensive guidance on what and arbitral jurisprudence on what constitutes a reasonable denial, and lots of advocacy saying what does not. And that's also in the PSAC alternation FAQ. Next slide, please. Okay, so the pension waiver. This I've mentioned it a few times. You may access if you take the voluntary departure program and choose option B, you could access the pension waiver if you're eligible, if you meet the outlined criteria here. If you are an alternate seeking to leave and you exit the public service, again, choosing option B. If you're opting, choose option B. For the pension waiver, your deputy head certifies that you are exiting because of WFA. There is the 55 to 59 for group 1, 60 to 64 for group 2, 10 years of service, and you haven't chosen option C is what the last one, or you don't have a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. Next slide, please. Not to be confused, the pension waiver is not to be confused with the early retirement incentive. This is a different, although it is a pension waiver to some extent, it further reduces the threshold of the pension waiver by 5 years for Group 1 and Group 2. This is a creature of Budget 2025, where they've amended the Public Service Superannuation Act. With these changes, you have at least 2 years of pensionable service, 10 years of employment, so same as the pension waiver. There's an additional criteria set by Treasury Board, which is rather opaque, but also know that the deadline for ERI applications closes on July 24th, and I have some statistics at the bottom of just what it looks like that's found on the public service website. Next slide, please. So the final sort of key content slide is just to know that at the departmental level, where Melanie sits on each of the departments of which USJE has represents members. These are some of the parameters of those committees where that advocacy takes place. We establish these committees to ensure that the employer is abiding by the appendix. They happen at local, national, regional, and local levels. Not sure of any ones that are happening at the local level at the moment. We get them in place early to get as much information as possible, to get the employer to have as much transparency as possible. And there are often dispute resolution bodies because not all WFA issues are addressed in the collective agreement. And the last point is about sort of an example of getting this is the attrition piece where we want to reduce privatization before there's any cuts. We shouldn't have contractors doing the work of members while members' jobs are being cut, of course. So I'll ask the folks to move to the next one. The last two slides are resource slides on the PSAC WFA landing page. There's a video that talks about a lot of the stuff I've talked about, with some to try to make this accessible. I know hearing it once quickly, it still may feel like you don't have a complete grasp on it, but there are many more resources for you out there. The video being one of them, and I'll just ask folks to move to the last slide before we jump into some questions. This is what the landing page looks like, this snapshot where we have the affected checklist that, like, say you have an affected letter. Thank you folks for putting those resources in the chat there. It gives you that step-by-step list of like what to do when you're affected. The FAQ is comprehensive and continues to be updated. We're hoping to get a new update out soon. Hopefully in July, August is the updated one, alternation platform and the guide and the member guide. So all of these resources are to make this process a very stressful process more understandable, or more, maybe not understandable is not the right word, but more so you understand, so you know the language to which you can advocate within. I'll end it there. Again, thank you very much for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Seb, who's going to start directing questions.
Thank you very much, Darren. Yes, we received over a dozen questions. I'll do my best to go through all of them, and I'll first ask the questions to Mel, just to give you a little breather there, Darren, to make sure you can have a glass of water. Melanie, I have a few questions for you, our Director of Labor Relations. I did receive a few, so let's try to see if we can get through at least 2 or 3 before we go back to Darren. Let's see, which first question. We have been told we would be red circled, but have not seen it in writing. When and how will this happen? What does this mean, red circled?
So red circle is a terminology that we've used in the past. It's actually salary protected, which means that your salary will remain as is if you're given a guarantee of a reasonable job offer or a reasonable job offer. So if you deploy into another position as a result of WFA exercise, it's at that point when there's actually a position to offer to you and you're going to get a letter of offer for that position, that it will be stipulated in your letter of offer that you are salary protected at whatever your group and level and salary is at the moment. So it's normal not to have seen anything yet. Salary protection provisions are standard, so you will see that, but only when you get a job offer.
Perfect. Thank you, Mel. And I know at the beginning of our info session, we had technical difficulties with simultaneous interpretation for when speakers were speaking in French. So I'm just going to switch in French just to make sure that it is indeed working properly. Aussi, si vous avez des questions, s'il vous plaît, les insérer dans la section d'avoir aux questions. Malheureusement, on ne peut pas ouvrir les micros ou les vidéos sur l'appel pour des raisons de difficultés techniques. Ça pourrait créer plus de problèmes que d'autres choses. Alors, s'il vous plaît, nous envoyez vos questions là. Also, we'll try to do our best to cover all the questions, but for individual circumstances, let's say I have 20 years of service, I have 2 kids, I live there, what should I do? We're going to give you the information, but you are the best person to make an informed decision. For these type of scenarios, please reach out to your elected official. Our USJE has full-time regional vice presidents, and they'll be more than happy to assist you. Mélanie, the next question for you. It's about SURLO. If a SURLO process occurs, how will it be conducted, and who will make the final decision on who gets the positions? Will it be a fair process?
So I think Darren touched on it. Obviously, SURLO is not something that we support or care for. Unfortunately, it is not in the collective agreement. So the union, our role right now is to try and gain leverage when talking to the employer, try to use our relationships to find out what the SURLO process would be. There is, unfortunately, no one size fits all. So for example, in CSC's Wave 1, they currently have, they're undergoing 17 different SURLO processes across the country. The reality is, some positions are well suited for an interview and a written exam, others are not. And so what we are trying to do is to get the methodology from the department for each of those SURLO processes, which is a way for us to sort of ascertain, or at the very least be able to tell members, this is what you can expect, this is what you're going into. We haven't gotten all the details, quite frankly. The decision maker is usually done at the local level, whoever your supervisor is. In some cases, they'll do a blind evaluation, meaning they'll take out all the names if it's a written test, for example. They usually, in the ones we have seen thus far, will bring in a third party either a director or manager from a separate department or from a separate region that doesn't know any of the individuals in the SERLO process. And that will sort of be, the neutral third party evaluator. So is it fair? I don't, to Darren's point, right? People are competing for their own jobs. So it starts from an unfair platform. They have come a long way from the DRAP years and what we saw in 2012. So there are sort of mechanisms that they're putting in place, such as the blind study and the outside party evaluator, that they're hoping to make it more fair. But there is no way for us to say with certainty that a process is fair because we don't know all the different processes that are being undergone.
Thank you, Mel. I'll ask you two more questions and then I'll go to Darren. Should we be concerned if it neither of the job offer statements and only offers VDP?
Okay.
Should we be concerned if it neither of the job offer statements and only offers VDP? So if they only offer VDP.
Okay, so I'm gonna assume that what you mean is that the notice of affected status doesn't give a guarantee of a regional job offer. Instead,
I think that's
it
what
just
they're
says,
trying to say, yes.
Should you be concerned? It's early to be concerned. So right now, what CSC is doing, they don't have guaranteed reasonable job offers. So like I said in my numbers, I think 392 of the 405 were all given an option for voluntary departure program. They are first going to see how many people will put up their hands to voluntarily depart. And that might actually it could potentially reach the target reduction target that I've also shared in the stats for that work location. If it does, that's the end of the exercise, and you will likely receive a retraction to your notice of affected status. If it doesn't, then they will have to look at, are they abolishing all? Are they going to declare people opting? Are they going to do a SERLO exercise? We do expect several SERLO exercises with this wave. So that would be sort of the next stage. I think it's premature to say you should be worried, but certainly with the VDP process, you should not be expecting a guarantee of a reasonable job offer right now.
Okay. Merci, Mélanie. Darren, we'll move to you. I have quite a few questions for you. If we have to relocate for a position, will we be paid travel status or relocation allowance? That's a great question. Darren?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if in the event that you secure a reasonable job offer that is located more than 40 kilometers from your prior home office, you're entitled to the relocation costs under the National Joint Directive on Relocation. Let me just double check the question. The answer is yes, but in like the particular situations where the employer is saying, here's a reasonable job offer, but it's beyond the 40 kilometers piece that's in the travel directive, that you get the relocation costs under the National Joint Council Directive on relocation.
Another question for you. If I am acting in a position that is vacant, can I lateral into it? If so, what would the process be?
So that one is, it's your rights and obligation. This one's kind of complicated. We do have an FAQ that has, I'll read it. We do have one that says what happens if my acting position, or what happens if I'm in an acting position and my substantive has been affected by WFA. So I would kind of have that question up to the person was it your substantive that was affected by WFA? But the basics of it is that your rights and obligations and those of the employer remain the same regardless of your acting status. In the eventuality that your substantive position is eliminated, this is if the substantive is affected due to WFA, you will no longer be able to occupy your acting assignment because your employment status remains attached to your substantive for the duration of an acting assignment. You will have the same rights as any other employee to all the provisions of the WFA appendix, and depending on if they're applicable access like voluntary departure program and all of those other pieces. So I kind of need a little bit more information from that person on the acting one. I would suggest connecting with your manager and having that conversation to flesh out the details, but also importantly, connect with a USJE LRO, because I'm not sure which if the
Again,
person
it's
has it
very
affected.
difficult to answer specific situations, but thank you for providing that information. What about the, let's talk pension waiver, Darren. What is the pension waiver? More specifically for option B. Could you clarify that point, please?
100%. Yeah. And apologies, I moved quickly through these ones. I wanted to afford the Q&A time. So the pension waiver, what it is it removes the normal reduction to an annual allowance that would be otherwise applied to an individual at termination if they didn't meet the age and service thresholds to receive their pension. So if you don't, say you're in group 1 and you need the factor 85. So if you don't have that and you want to leave, a 5% per year penalty is applied to you if you try to leave. Now, what the pension waiver does, and this is available via WFA, is it removes that reduction, that penalty that you're paid. It removes it, and it lowers the years without a reduction. So it's beneficial to folks who are maybe in group 1 and you're 55 or 56, because now there's no penalty if you choose this pension way, or if you decide to retire. So that's what it is. Again, the slides that they'll post alongside this video will have that information, that description, but it's basically this penalty, this removal of this penalty as a means for to sort of, I guess, incentivize option B if you qualify, if you have the years of service, and if you have the age criteria. Hopefully that adds a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm getting, I'm getting quite a few questions about the pension waiver. 2 of them just came in, and I'm going to try to combine them, and hopefully you can answer that, Darren. Is there any different qualifications for the pension waiver age restriction for operational service, or is it 55 years old and 60 years old for everyone?
For this instance, it's 55 and 60 years old for everyone for the pension waiver. And remember, for the ERI piece, it's 5 years lower for each of those ones. But
okay. And the next one, can I get the pension waiver and take the TSM?
Yes. So that's if you choose option B. Remember, option B, you can't receive an education allowance and get the pension waiver. But if you choose option B, TSM, pension waiver if you're eligible, resignation.
Okay. And I think I've heard you talk about kilometers. I think it was for, I'll just ask a question. Is there a maximum distance from headquarters that a job offer can be offered to you?
That's an interesting question. The answer is no, I guess, because they're just relative to the way that question is worded. But the question in the FAQ, the way we capture this is, will an employer cover my relocation costs? Yes, yes, they will if it's more than 40 kilometers. But if an employer has but there's an advocacy piece here, right? Because if an employer has reasonable job offers and you're not willing to relocate, often it's a better deal to just receive the options, to receive option A, B, or C. So there's that communication piece that I think is important. If you receive a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, and all of a sudden they're saying, yeah, but you got to move across the country, like, is that reasonable? And then that's where the USJE LROs are going to be fundamental to that situation. So somebody has that. I mean, I heard Melanie say there's no guarantees of reasonable job offer in this instance at CSC, but contact your LRO and know that there's an advocacy piece relative to the way that question's worded, because there's no strict limit. They can do all kinds of crazy stuff, but or problematic things the employer can do.
I know I'm getting a lot of individual specific scenarios. It's very difficult for us to answer, so I'm just trying to find a little bit more generic questions. Again, just reminding people that we do have labor relations officers and regional vice presidents to assist you. I did see a few questions, Darren, about what happens to vacation and family leave, or that one-time marriage leave. Like, what happens to those leaves?
Vacation leave. Like what do we mean? What happens? Like,
what happened to our current year vacation and family leave? Do we need to reimburse them if we use them?
Right. Like, are they paid out? Like if you
Mm-hmm.
depart the public service, vacation leave, that is I believe vacation leave, I believe the vacation leave is paid out. But the other ones sounded like they may be special leave, or it's
Mm-hmm.
not every single leave in the collective agreement does not
Right.
get paid out. There are particular ones like the severance, of course, if you're for the layoff and if you haven't taken it, but there's also, um, yeah, not
Yeah,
every leave is going to be paid out.
nothing is simple, right? Okay,
Contact your LRO on that one.
yes. Mel, I do have a few questions for you. Let me go back here. Euh, J'en ai une en français. Je suis AS2 touché. J'ai trouvé une employée AS1 intéressée à faire un échange de poste lorsque je serai optante. La différence est de 7,3% à la baisse. On nous a dit que ça sera refusé car la différence est supérieure à 6%. Je trouve cette décision insensée car l'employeur économiserait au bout de la ligne. Qu'en pensez-vous? Y a-t-il des représentations à faire? Ça, c'est une bonne question, ça.
C'est une bonne question. Malheureusement, 6%, c'est la limite. C'est des échanges de postes, c'est pas une promotion. C'est pas pour, donc, c'est leur maximum. C'est dans les règles sur la dotation. Donc, l'employeur a raison de refuser 6%, même 6,1%, honnêtement, ça serait refusé.
OK, parfait. Puis je t'avais envoyé une question qu'on avait reçue tantôt, Mélanie, que je peux pas trouver, mais je pense que j'avais partagé avec toi d'un de nos membres.
Seb,
If
well,
is a member considered qualified if they are in a qualified pool but does not occupy the position yet? Oh, Mélanie, your mic decided to.
Darren, were you jumping in for something or am I good to?
you're good to go.
Oh, okay, apologies. Um, Qualified. So if you're in a pool, I'm going to assume that's for a higher position. Again, the 6% that we just talked about, if you're qualified for a position, but it is higher than your substantive, then no, there is no just slotting in. There is no promotional activity with a WFA exercise. It's normally at group and level or within the 6% range.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions. VDP again, Darren. Can you please explain the severance pay for those accepted for VDP?
Yeah, no problem. So in the collective agreement, so you're eligible. So if you're taking VDP and you are, say you're taking option, you're in a voluntary departure program, you've decided to take option B, you take the TSM, you're also eligible for severance per the collective agreement. Now, there's an article in the collective agreement that speaks to severance upon layoff. So depending on how many years of service you have, you will be eligible for the severance upon layoff as outlined in the per your collective agreement. So you'd have to know exactly what they are. But if you are eligible for severance upon layoff, if you are taking option B and resigning through a VDP, there's also I think that's the core of the question.
Okay. Now, I don't know for the last question, I don't know, Mel or Darren. If my group goes into Surlo, can CSC change the language requirements on the position from unilingual to bilingual during that process? Do we know? Darren or Mel?
Yeah, I could speak to that. So in the Surlo slide that I had up, I pointed to that there's the Surlo process gives managers full discretion to determine the essential qualifications during the of the work. And in addition to that, that includes the that can include the language requirements. So unfortunately, yes, we haven't seen sort of full-scale switches of like complete changes of language requirements and then testing needed, but there's been a few pocketed problems about that. So yeah, the Surlo process is tons of manager discretion.
Okay, good information to know. Thank you, Darren. We got overwhelmed by questions. We normally can get through all of them this evening. Unfortunately, we were not able to get through all of the questions. That being said, we do have another info session at 8:30 Eastern Time. You can register for that one. The guides have been shared in the chat. And also, if you want to, if you do need additional information, you can go on our website and find the contact information of your regional vice president and your labor relations officer. There's support available there to you. If you do want to stay on the call, we will break out into focus groups. Because we want to know if your job is actually affected and eliminated, how will this impact public safety? How will it impact your coworkers? And how will Canadians feel the burden of the brunt of those job cuts? And regional vice presidents will be leading those conversations. You should have received an email to that effect as well if you subscribed in advance. One of my colleague Megan will be posting in the chat right now all the individual groups. So we'll begin with the HR, Human Resources. That group discussion will be led by RVP Kirsty Havard from beautiful British Columbia. And Megan will be putting that link in the chat right now. So you can just click on the link and that will bring you right to your next conversation. It's just a 1-hour breakout just so we can obtain some crucial information from you frontline staff. The second breakout room, Corporate Services, that will be led by RVP Carol Osborne from New Brunswick. Corporate Services, Carol Osborne, and I see that's been in the chat. The next one, number 3, Health Services, by one of our former FOSS member, actually, Lorianne Wesselby from Dorchester, New Brunswick. Health Services is in the chat. And last but not least, Programs. And programs will be led by RVP Shauna Ward from the beautiful Prairies. So again, we'll leave those in the chat for a little bit. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact your regional vice presidents or your labor relations officer. On that note, thank you very much, everyone, and have yourself a good evening.